Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 20.
Laptop off. Okay, so welcome everybody to the infrastructure meeting today. And if members are content, I'm going to proceed through the agenda as follows. So we don't have any apologies today, so we'll move to declarations of interest. I remind members that they are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interest which might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to the matter under consideration. Any members who have interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now or when the particular matter arises in the meeting. So does any members have any declarations that they wish to declare at this stage? No. Okay, chairperson's business. I have just one item and that's in relation to an invitation that myself and the Deputy Chair received for the Maritime UK Awards. It is a black tie event, but unfortunately myself and the Chair and the Deputy Chair cannot attend, so I'm putting out the invitation to anybody who wants to attend from the Infrastructure Committee. The date is the 5th of June and it is at 6:30 in the Titanic, Belfast. So if any members want to go along on behalf of the Infrastructure Committee, if you want to speak to us later on, I can give you the details of that, okay? So we now move on to the draft minutes, which is at page 7, and the draft minutes of proceedings for the meeting on the 1st of May 2024. So I just want to seek agreement that members are content that the minutes are true and accurate reflection of the meeting on the 1st of May 2024. If so, I'll sign the minutes. Thank you. And then item 5 is matters arising, and at page 15 you'll see the outstanding request for response, which I'm asking members to note. All content? Yeah. And then at item 6 is the correspondence. At page 20 you'll see the correspondence memo. At page 25 you'll see the response from the Minister for Infrastructure to issues arising from the committee meeting on the 10th of April. I want to remind members that the committee considered correspondence on the 10th of April regarding North Channel Wind project and agreed to seek a response from the department on the issues raised. North Channel Wind has also requested an opportunity to brief the committee on the project, so I'm seeking agreement to forward the extract from the Minister's letter to North Channel Wind for information and request a written briefing on the planning related challenges for the project. I also just want to remind members that officials will be providing evidence on the strategic planning policy statement on the issue of climate change, in addition to other planning matters at next week's meeting. The initial correspondence from the North Channel Wind will be included in the meeting pack for that session for members' information. So are you content with that approach? Right. Yeah. You'll also see reference just in the letter from the Minister regarding A1 and the safety measures and what's being explored. So I think as a committee would welcome the fact that the Minister and his officials are exploring what options can be put in place there for safety measures, because I know the committee were quite involved and concerned about that issue. So I think, it would be remiss to not welcome that in the meeting today, given it's in that correspondence. At page 29, you'll see the correspondence from the Forum for Better Homes Northern Ireland seeking support for planning measures that will contribute to addressing housing need. And I'm just seeking agreement to include the correspondence in the papers for the oral evidence session on issues relating to the planning system at next week's meeting, if you're all content with that. Yeah. At page 55, you'll see correspondence from the Committee for Finance regarding the consideration of the Memorandum of Reply to the Public Accounts Committee report, which is planning in Northern Ireland. So advise members that the Public Accounts Committee is scheduled to consider the Memorandum of Reply at its meeting on the 9th of May, tomorrow. The committee will therefore wish to defer its consideration until PAC has completed its work.
Just to declare an interest, Chair, I'm a member of the committee.
And me too, Chair.
PAC, yeah.
Content with that approach, yeah? Yep. Okay. And then I'm just seeking agreement to all the remaining actions as per the correspondence memo. Everyone content with that, or anything they want to raise? Content? Okay, so we now move to item 7, which is the overview of its roles and functions of Waterways Ireland. So you'll see at page 68 is the clerk's memo. At page 72 is written evidence. At page 90 there's the Waterways Ireland 10-year plan. At page 109 is Waterways Ireland Annual Report and Accounts 2022. And at page 186, you'll see Strabane Greenways regarding a letter in terms of greenways in West Tyrone. So I'm just seeking agreement that the evidence is recorded by Hansard today. All happy? Yep. And I want to welcome to the committee today Mr. John McDonough, Chief Executive, Waterways Ireland. Good to see you again, John.
Thank you, Chair.
We have Mrs. Linda McGahey, Director of Finance and Personnel Waterways Ireland, and Mr. Garrett McGrath, Northern Regional Manager of Waterways Ireland. It's really, really good to see you. Fortunately, John, we're not in the salubrious Belle estate today whenever we were at the 10-year plan launch, but it's really, really good to have you at committee today, and we're looking forward to your evidence. I think you have a presentation that you're going to give to the committee, so I'll let you go through the presentation and then we'll come to members' questions then at the end.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. So first of all, to the Chair and members, thank you for offering Waterways Ireland the opportunity to appear in front of the committee. My colleagues are with me, Linda and Garrett, and we three of us actually walk you through some presentation material. I'm conscious of the fact that there's a certain amount of time allocated, so on the basis of that we're going to move through the presentation material reasonably quickly because we want to make sure there's enough time for people to ask questions. So on that basis I'm going to kick off, if that's okay, Chair. Yeah. So if I go to slide number 1 in the deck, just to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So we're the largest of the 6 North-South implementation bodies. We celebrate our 25th anniversary in December this year. We're accountable to the North-South Ministerial Council, and on an operational basis we're accountable to 2 sponsor departments. So in Northern Ireland it's obviously the Department for Infrastructure, and in Dublin it's the Department for Housing, Local Government and Heritage. What's our remit? Our remit is to manage, maintain, develop and restore our navigation network. To put it in perspective, we have 1,100 kilometres of navigable waters, principally for amenity and recreational purposes, and in addition to that we're the leading provider of greenways in Ireland and Northern Ireland with an estate of about 600 kilometres. So if I point to the map which is attached to the presentation, without getting through every one, you can see we have at this stage 8 navigations, the latest one being the Ulster Canal Restoration Project. You can see that we stretch from the top of Northern Ireland at Coleraine the whole way down through the Shannon into Limerick, and if we come across the country from the Shannon through the Royal and Grand Canal into Grand Canal Basin and Spencer Dock in Dublin. So it's quite a big estate. 85% of the estate is in Ireland and 15% is in Northern Ireland, and we'll come back to that point when we're talking about funding in a few moments. As a result of that, you can imagine that most of our people are in Ireland, most of our assets are in Ireland, most of the projects that we do are in Ireland, and a good proportion of the funding is from Ireland. So just to say that at the start. We have about 350 permanent staff. Roughly 260 people are based in Ireland and 90 are in Northern Ireland. Our head office is in Enniskillen in Fermanagh, and we have offices in Carrick and Shannon, Dublin and Scariff, close to the waterways themselves. In our last piece of research, we discovered and we established that we had over 3 million people who visit the waterways annually. So that's either to do on-water activity, private cruise hire, boating, kayaking, paddling, etc., and people who actually are obviously users of the greenways off-water. The current valuation of our assets is in and around $1 billion, and as an infrastructure committee, you can imagine their infrastructure assets. There are things like bridges and lock gates and all of the typical assets that you'd expect in and around waterways. The second slide is around our governance structure. I just want to highlight a couple of things. So I mentioned accountability to North-South Ministerial Council and the Secretariat in Armagh. We have 2 ministers, Minister O'Dowd here in Northern Ireland and Minister O'Brien in Ireland. I am the accounting officer in addition to the Chief Executive. We do have an audit and risk committee with an independent chair, and we have 2 other independent members. I do want to highlight the piece in the middle, which there is no board. There was no board established in the formation of the body. And there's some narrative on the right which points to the fact that that's something that's being considered now at the North-South Ministerial Council. Was mentioned in the meeting in May-November 2021 and is on the agenda with the North-South Ministerial Council. I want to just touch on corporate planning, if I can, for a second, and try and condense it all onto one visual here. So if I start on the left-hand side, our annual report and accounts for 2022 have been laid, obviously here in the Assembly and in the Oireachtas in the last month. We have a business plan for 2024, which is in draft format, approved by our sponsor departments, but it's draft because it has to be approved at a sectoral meeting of the North-South Ministerial Council, which we hope will happen in June. Similarly, we have a corporate plan that runs from 23 to 25, and that will also be approved at the sectoral meeting. And then on the far right-hand side, and Chair mentioned this earlier on, we launched our 10-year plan at the back end of 2023. It's the first time we've had a plan that goes beyond the corporate 3 years, and it's a very important plan for us in terms of our ambition and our aspirations for the future. And I will just go to one slide, which is next up, where we try to cover a lot of things in one slide. So I guess the first point is it's a directional pathway around where we want to be going forward in the next 10 years. We have a clear purpose. So the purpose is about being the custodian of the navigations, and it's about reimagining, maintaining, developing in a sustainable way for communities, environment and heritage. We have a vision. The vision is around creating inspirational experiences. And then we have a set of values for our people, which are around passion, collaboration, accountability and innovation. The right-hand side of the exhibit points to the fact that the plan has 6 strategic priorities. So we're focused clearly on 6 things. One of them is around organisation, development and governance. One of them is around sustainable funding model. The third one is around our asset portfolio and how we manage that. The fourth one is participation and reputation. Participation in this instance meaning growing the number of users who come to our waterways and our greenways. 5 is all about sustainable development. So we recognise that you can develop, but we need to do it sustainably, given our assets. And the 6th one is very clearly around climate action, environment and heritage. To point to the bottom of the exhibit, it's a 10-year plan. There's a foundation stage, which is the first 3 years. We're currently in the building foundation stage. We will finish that at a point in time, the end of 25, and then we will go into what we call accelerated growth, which is more about transformative projects in the future. And then obviously, following that, we're into sustainable performance. All of that looks to generate value, and our purpose is to generate economic, social and environmental well-being value for the public good in Northern Ireland and Ireland. That's our purpose. That's what we're here to do. So when we talk about growth later on, it's about growing participation, more people coming to our waterways, and by doing that, we will grow value for the economies and the communities, the social aspect, and in a way that's sustainable for the environment. Now, I'm going to go forward. I'm passing to Linda. I'll do the navigation on the laptop so she can concentrate on the next few slides, and she's going to talk about funding, expenditure and value creation.
Morning. Just to explain where our financing comes from. So we are funded via Department of Infrastructure and the Department of Housing and Local Government in Ireland. So the capital funding, which is shown there on the left-hand side, that is specific to the jurisdiction in which the asset lies. Our current funding, on the other hand, is 85% from Ireland and 15% from the north. So if you look over the last 8 years there, you will see that there has been growth, but significantly much more in capital than there has been in current. But they still are both growing. So we've done quite well over the last 8 years now, specifically from 2020 to 2024, there's been significant growth in the capital. And I would point out that this does not include Ulster Canal funding. That is separate. We didn't put it on here. Okay, because that would be considered exceptional. So if you look at the next slide, you will see there the current expenditure. So if you take on your staff and your pensions, 65% of our funding is spent there in the current, and the remainder is actually running that and the maintaining of the assets that we currently own. In the capital side, you will see there 85% is from Ireland, 11% is from Northern Ireland, and the remainder is due to our partnerships with the local councils and Fáilte Ireland, where we would enhance assets mainly in the south of Ireland, and that's where we get other funding from. Now, part of our 10-year plan that John had mentioned there, you will actually see we're not only conscious about the money we bring in and spend in our assets, we're conscious of the value creation that we bring to Northern Ireland and to Ireland. So as part of our strategic Waterways Ireland plan, we want to build an inspirational inland navigations and waterway experiences. So it's our ambition to create value with the macroeconomic interventions. Example I can give you is the Royal Canal Greenway, which attracted in its first year 640,000 visitors, which generated 17 million for the local economy. So it's what we have actually done, and as will be starting in the next few months, is we've engaged Indicon, which will be contracted to help determine our value creation over the next 10 years. And this will be used to aid us to align our vision with participation, environmental and our sustainable goals, which is mentioned in our 10-year plan. So I'll hand over then to Garrett, who will go through the transformation projects.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to now to highlight some of our transformative projects we've ongoing within Waterways Ireland at the moment. And maybe if I refer back to our purpose, as John referenced earlier on, is to be custodians of the inland navigation, to collaborate, to reimagine, maintain, develop and promote them to sustain communities, environment and the heritage. So let's take a look at each of those in turn. Custodians. We're currently involved in revising our Shannon navigation and our canal bylaws. The current bylaws are over 30 years old. We've carried out an extensive public engagement process, and we hope to finalise with new bylaws later this year. And that'll give us a new set of tools to manage our waterways and our towpaths in an appropriate manner going forward. Next slide, John, please. In terms of collaboration, Shannon Tourism Master Plan. So this is where Waterways Ireland, as the lead partner, engaged 10 local authorities along the Shannon and the Shannon-Erne Waterway, along with Fáilte Ireland, to develop a sustainable tourism action plan for the Shannon-Erne and the Shannon. And really it's about repositioning the Shannon as a tourism destination on the island of Ireland. Reimagine. Waterways Ireland are now responsible for restoring the Ulster Canal from Knockern to Clonus. That's a 13.5 kilometre stretch. We're delivering it in a phased manner. Phase 1, which was completed in 2019, you can travel from Upper Lough to Castle Saunderson in County Cavan. Excuse me. Phase 2 will be finished at the end of May. That's an additional kilometre from Clonus back to the Fermanagh border. And Phase 3, we're currently working on pre-planning process at that stage at the moment. Next slide, John. In terms maintain Carn Row Weir. So this is a weir on the lower Bann. It's a scheduled monument. It was built in the 1850s. It's a masonry weir. It was in poor condition. So we commenced a rehabilitation project. It is going to take us 3 years. We commenced it in 2022. We hope to finish it this year. It's a very challenging project. It's in a live river environment on the lower Bann. It's the largest investment in our assets in Northern Ireland outside our headquarters building. So it's a very difficult project, but we hope to finalise it this year. As John referenced earlier on in terms of development of greenways, we're the largest provider of greenways and blueways on the island of Ireland at 600 kilometres. Thank you, John. Promote. So we have an ongoing programme of digital transformation within Waterways Ireland at the moment, and one of those projects that we're hope to launch our new Waterways Ireland website at the end of May. So that'll help us to promote our waterways and our greenways and our blueways across the island of Ireland and further afield. And finally, sustain. We have our climate action plan. We have a draft biodiversity heritage plan. And I suppose this is really about how we're aware of the twin challenges that climate action and loss of biodiversity has for the organisation. And what we're trying to do is embed a culture and policies and procedures about sustainable development along our waterways going forward. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to John just to sum up.
So just to summarise, if I can, conscious of time, 3 things to mention in summary. So our 10-year plan is about targeted growth. So targeted for a number of reasons. We want to grow participation on and along our waterways. By doing that, we grow the value that we create economically, socially and environmentally. It has to be targeted because there are many things going on. We can't do everything all at the one time. There are obviously funding requirements to do that. To be able to grow, you have to have the human and financial resources in place. On the human resource side, We're currently in the middle of our first ever organisation review, which has been supported by our sponsor departments. We're working through that. That will put a sense around what the organisation needs to look like in terms of structure and staffing numbers. So that's a big piece of work and a very important piece for the future. Obviously, there will be a cost around what that might look like, and we don't know what that is yet until we close out on the piece of work. And then on funding, we have what I call normative and transformational funding. So right now we have normative funding, which enables us to do the things that we want to do in the now. But as we go forward and move into that phase of accelerated growth, there will be a need for transformative funding because we will look to have transformative projects in place. We've specifically identified, for example, Dublin as an area where there's an opportunity, large opportunities for transformative development there. But equally in Northern Ireland, there are positions, for example, in and around the Airn system, where we'd like more presence, more representation. That will require funding as well. So at this point, I'm going to stop. I'm conscious that we've kind of gone through that reasonably quickly, and I'm happy to go to the chair and members for any questions we can answer.
That's super, thank you, and thank you for that overview of the work of Waterways Ireland. It's really, really useful, and it's good to see what you are doing and to give us that overview. I suppose just to kick off in relation to funding, you talked there about 85% from the Republic of Ireland, 15% from here from Northern Ireland. So is there a requirement under your funding arrangements that it prescribes or restricts how much each jurisdiction gets, and how do you decide then, you know, in terms of the projects, I suppose, for each area?
Yeah, so the 85-15 is a proportionality prescription from the formation of the body 25 years ago. So just to say that up front. Typically how it happens is that we are operating in two different jurisdictions, so there are different budgetary arrangements in place. So we operate a calendar year in Ireland, and obviously in Northern Ireland it's an April to March financial year. So the budget in Ireland is set at a point in time, usually around October. And on the back of that, we would then be provided with a budget from, in this case, the Department for Housing and Local Government. That sets an amount, and on the basis of that amount, then our department in Northern Ireland allocates its proportion, and as a result of that, the two are joined together, and the 85 and 15 become our budget. In terms of the allocation, that's all around current budget, so just for clarification, it's nothing to do with capital projects, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So that is then allocated across our organisation, which operates across the border. So we don't separate and say there's something in Ireland specifically and there's something in Northern Ireland specifically, because our staff effectively work across the island of Ireland.
Okay.
On capital, capital is funded by our departments in Ireland or Northern Ireland, and that funding depends on where the project is located. So if there's a project in Northern Ireland, the funding comes out of our Northern Ireland funding. If there's a project in Ireland, it comes out of our Ireland funding. Okay.
And in terms of obviously determining, you've no board in place, and obviously you have pointed to that.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's part of that. Point one, I suppose, in terms of governance and organisational development.
Yes.
So, you know, in terms of accountability, I did note in your report that you do have engagement with the department from both jurisdictions, and that's quarterly monitoring.
Yes, just to come in on that. So in terms of accountability, there are a number of things that happen. So for example, formally, there is a quarterly monitoring meeting with both sponsor departments. So that happens every quarter. We have an audit and risk committee that meets every quarter. And then obviously beyond the formality of that, we have a lot of interaction with our sponsor departments on an ongoing basis.
And does that look at then, you know, the breakdown of the funding that may have been given and where that's going to, and all of that as well as part of that?
So in those meetings, for example, in the monitoring meetings, we would present on a quarterly basis progress against projects, performance, etc. Yeah.
And then it said also in your report about establishing strategic oversight group, steering group, and a project management office. That's in your 10-year plan.
Yeah.
So who do you envisage is going to sit on these organisational bodies?
Yeah. So the way that we're planning with the long-term plan right now is we have what's called an extended leadership group within the organisation. So these are heads of functions. There may be 40 people or so in total. So the oversight group will become the executive leadership team within Waterways Ireland, and each strategic pillar will have a chair with a subgroup for each pillar, and then the chair, on behalf of the subgroup, will report to the executive leadership group, and that's how we will manage the progress over time on the 10-year plan. And then on a quarterly basis, we bring that progress report to the monitoring meeting where we have our sponsor departments.
So, for example, you know, the way you talked about increase in participation and things like that there,
Yes.
will there be, this is outside of our remit, but in terms of tourism and people like that, are those people going to be included then in the likes of those?
Well, we have a number of things that go on at any given time, and Gareth will give you an example of one, for a very specific one. So the Shannon Tourism Master Plan is a collaborative piece with Fáilte and lots of local authorities. It's an exemplar plan that we're using now for other navigations. There's one specifically in and around the Earn system, and Gareth may just give you a sense of the parties who were involved in that, so that you understand.
Yeah.
Who's involved?
Yeah, so in 2023, Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, Waterways Ireland and Tourism NI developed a visitor experience development plan for Lough Erne. Well, for the district, obviously Waterways Ireland's interest is isolated to Lough Erne because that's our remit. And really it's about how we can improve the visitor experience to the district and to the waterway. So that was launched in 2023. It's a 10-year plan, so it's an ambitious plan on how we can improve the tourism, the visitor experience to the region. So that's ongoing. Year one was last year, and now we're into year two in terms of delivering a number of projects. An example of the projects we've delivered on the plan to date is Waterways Island. It's an iconic site on the Earn system. We've increased the mooring capacity at that location for 15 boats. That's done, it's open, and it will be open for the boating season this year. So it's just an example of the type of infrastructure that we're building on the Earn to improve the visitor experience.
If I just move to the greenways in terms of that, I suppose, collaborative approach, what is Northern Ireland, our Waterways Ireland role in development of greenways in Northern Ireland, and how does it engage with the government and Department for Infrastructure, and particularly thinking around, say for example, abandonment of land from DFI that could be perhaps transformed into the likes of greenways. And I'm just wondering about that engagement with DFI on that side, but also working with the local councils. So if you could chat maybe to
okay.
that.
So Gareth again will take that, because we're actively involved in what we call the Ulster Canal corridor in relation to the Greenway. But generally there's a number of points there that Gareth will cover off.
So Waterways Ireland is currently the lead partner in the development of the Ulster Canal Greenway. It's just under 200 kilometres of Greenway, predominantly along the route of the old Ulster Canal. It's cross-border, so we have a number of councils in Northern Ireland. We have two, Armagh, Bramebridge and Craigavon and Mid-Ulster, and then we have Monaghan, Cavan and Fermanagh as well. So it's a collaborative approach in terms of developing the Greenway over a period of time. 50% of the stages are at pre-planning in their progress. In Ireland, Waterways Ireland itself is developing a Greenway along the Ulster Canal. So when we're developing the Ulster Canal, there will be a Greenway developed at the same time. We're not coming back at a later stage to develop a Greenway. The funding, there's a number of sources of funding that we're seeking, certainly in Ireland with TII, Department of Transport. With respect to Northern Ireland, the District Council are exploring funding opportunities. There's ongoing engagement with the Department of Transport, our own department in Northern Ireland, with respect to funding opportunities and how we could develop that Greenway over time.
in respect specifically to the abandonment of land, what engagement takes place in relation to developing that into Greenway? Because there, I mean, even through the committee here, we had a specific matter relating to Conleague, and through the committee's intervention, the council is looking at feasibility in terms of whether a greenway could be developed there. So specifically in terms of a proactive approach to creating greenways in Northern Ireland, how much engagement actually takes place between between Waterways Ireland and the department?
I think, Chair, it's important to point out in terms of a remit that our remit is around our navigable waterways. So where we look to develop greenways in the main, it's around our network. And the reason for that is strategically, it's better for us to develop where we own the assets. So if you look, for example, in Ireland, you look at the Grand Canal and the Royal Canal, which are very long stretches of greenway, we're actually building greenways on our own assets. If you look at the Ulster Canal corridor, with the exception of the Ulster Canal project itself, where we will own assets, we don't own the assets. The assets are owned by third parties, maybe a local council, for example. That's a slightly different scenario for us. So we wouldn't proactively look to develop greenways that are not our assets. We would support councils and other bodies who are looking to develop the greenways, and we would support them with our expertise and our people. But the models are different, and it's important that I kind of point that out.
Thank you for that. Just before I come to members, there's just one last question I want to ask just around greenways, and that is the Grand Canal. And, you know, obviously we're all aware in this room, you know, that there are some pressing issues to do with the refugee situation. Yes. And just wondering, you know, if you can point to how the difficulties surrounding that at this moment in time for yourselves, and is there any budgetary concerns that you may have relating to that and the engagement that's maybe going on with government at the minute in relation to that?
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's a very difficult situation for everybody. So I want to look at this through a number of different lenses. It's difficult for asylum seekers who are in the position that they're in. It's difficult for residents, it's difficult for business owners. You know, it's difficult for Waterways Ireland. At the moment we have approximately 90 tents on a stretch of the Grand Canal. It's difficult for all stakeholders. So right now what's happening is we are engaged with a multi-agency a group to work out how we can quickly deal with the issue that's there in a way that is empathetic and sympathetic to all of the different needs that exist. There are active conversations and discussions going on about how we might resolve that matter. For us, it's really difficult insofar as it's a concentrated number of tents. So it's not like us trying to deal with 1, 2, or 3 tents, you know, in a very singular way. The concentration makes it very difficult because it's of scale and it requires an operation of scale to relocate. Relocation depends to a large extent on the availability of accommodation, and that's where we're involved with multi-agencies to work out how that can happen. It is actively under consideration, but it is difficult for everybody, not just Waterways Ireland.
Okay, I'm going to go to the Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks so much for coming along today and for your presentation and questions so far. I've just got a couple here. First one's around finance. On the presentation, there was quite a large uplift in the capital budget, and I think we'd all welcome that. I'm just wondering, is that on the back of the 10-year plan and your proposals and pitches for the projected capital works you want to carry out, or was there additional funding that was just made available to yourselves to spend sort of as you pleased within capital works? I'm just curious why such the uplift, and is there also a guaranteed year-on-year budgetary increase that you've received in terms of the funding offering?
Okay, so I'll answer first, and then I may look to Linda. So there's no guarantee about funding.
Okay,
I mean,
even a multi-year budget at this stage?
No, we don't have a multi-year
Okay. So
budget.
just
That's a
working
really
on the
important
budget.
question,
Okay.
actually. That is something we would like to have, but we don't
think
have.
we'd
So
all
we don't
agree
have a
with that.
guarantee.
Yeah.
If I go back a little bit, maybe this might help to answer the question.
Yeah.
If we went back to 2015, 14, 13, whatever, back to the austerity times and the economic crisis, you would see that our funding had dropped to 45 or 50% of the number we received in 2010. So if we rebase our numbers from 2010 the whole way through to now, you would see at a point in time we were down about 45 or 50%. Then there was a period of stagnation that you can see in the slide, 16, 17, 18, 19, into 20, and you can then see some growth. So that growth occurred as a result of conversations that we've had with departments, as a result of plans, not the 10-year plan, I'll come on to that, but other plans and ambitions around, projects that we felt could deliver value. And we've been fortunate that we've been able to see this level of increase. We've had an increase on the current side, not to the same level, and that's an important factor to understand proportionality between current and capital. Yep. Sometimes you can get a lot of capital and you need more current because you need the people and you need the resources and all the rest to make the projects happen. So we watch that that piece. In terms of the 10-year plan, the 10-year plan, I think, is given us a vision, a view of life around perspective and ambition and aspiration for the future. And I think that we're able to demonstrate to our sponsor departments that there will be opportunities for transformative projects. That will require transformative funding. The Ulster Canal in total, if it's completed, let's say back end 2028, you're talking about 125 million of the order of. Mm-hmm. That's transformative in our side, from our perspective, because we're a relatively small agency. So a number like 125 million spread over time is a big number. Gareth referred to the Shannon Tourism Master Plan. That has a commitment from Waterways Ireland of 76 million over 10 years. That's a big transformative piece. So that's the difference. We came from a place where funding had declined very significantly, and even though you're seeing growth, it's only really bringing us back to where we were. Yeah.
No, that's really useful. In terms of then identifying the benefits of the multi-year budget, obviously that would be massive in respect to those key projects, and clearly that's something you continue to lobby for, as of other groups. So Correct. Hopefully we get to that stage. Just moving on to greenways. It's a lot across the country. There seems to be a little bit of a change in how these are delivered, and some councils in some areas have been really successful and others have not. I'm just curious to get a feel for, are there particular council areas in Northern Ireland versus the Republic of Ireland who engage better with you, and what sort of expertise are they able to tap into from yourselves to develop those greenways? Because I think in my constituency we've had one on the cards for 15 years that's been just dragging on through objections and complaints and doesn't really seem to be getting anywhere. And I'm just wondering what councils can do to access that support and expertise.
Yeah, well, in terms of development agreements, there are generally 4 challenges. Mm-hmm. The first challenge is funding. The second challenge is obviously land acquisition. If you don't own the land, you have to acquire land. Third challenge is capital development. And then the final challenge is maintaining it. So, yeah, in terms of the councils that we've worked with in Northern Ireland, all very proactive and engaging with ourselves and very keen to see the delivery of greenways in their district council area, and we would help them and assist them where we can. But obviously, I suppose it's around having the strategy, like the Ulster Canal Greenway strategy, and then seeking funding opportunities to allow you to progress to the vesting, as it is in Northern Ireland, or in Ireland it's the CPO process in terms of acquisition of land, and that is a difficult process, to deliver. But we have certainly great working relationships with the district councils and local authorities. We all have the same vision of to develop these greenways, but there are challenges when you don't own the land initially to develop them.
And during the presentation, you said there was a financial or funding relationship between the local councils and the Republic of Ireland. To a degree, or certainly financial overlap, is that the same with councils in Northern Ireland, or do they pay when they tap into your expertise for assistance in greenway development?
I think maybe one thing to say, and maybe you might come into this, we ourselves don't get direct funding for greenways.
Okay.
So funding comes through different agencies.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe just to make that point, you talked about TII, so maybe if you could just expand a wee bit on that.
So in Ireland, there are a number of funding streams for greenways, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, Department of Transport, Shared Island Fund, to name but a few, that help us to deliver those greenways on our property or other people's property that is a CPO or vested. In Northern Ireland, the funding opportunities are more challenging, and I know the district councils are actively engaged in looking at potential funding opportunities to allow them to deliver the greenways in their district council area, and we will support them where we can.
Okay.
It's also important to point out, if I could, we don't have vesting powers in Northern Ireland.
Yep, exactly.
So we work with DFI, who are helping us massively in that space around the Ulster Canal Phase 3 project. So just to make you aware of that.
Okay, one last point, Chair, if I may. Just in terms of the 10-year plan, strategic priority 4 on participation and reputation states that Waterways Ireland's success will be increased participation alongside waterways in all recreation, tourism and volunteering, which I think we'd all welcome and want to see that. I'm just curious to see how that's been baselined in terms of the participation in those areas up to this point, and then how it will be measured going forward to measure that success, because it is a key, obviously, priority.
Okay, so measurement to date has tended to be by quantitative research. So we would do that on a periodic basis. So literally it's a quant exercise. We go out and we ask national representative sample, 1,300 people, and we get a bunch of data back. Linda's point in relation to where we go forward here around the value creation is we are working with an economic consultancy firm in the next number of months who will help us to put in place methodologies that we can update and feed the data into on an annual basis going forward, so that we can address the question that you're asking. Okay. So to work out the value, which is like a value, we have to have inputs and methodologies, and we're looking here not just at the obvious economic or social things. So there is a piece in here around natural capital accounting. And we're just finishing a piece of work around natural capital accounting. It's like a piece of work that hasn't really been done to date. And that's looking at biodiversity growth and biodiversity loss and all the rest of it. And that will feed in as well into the calculations. So we will, by the end of the year, have the methodologies in place, the baseline, and then on a year-to-year basis going forward, we'll measure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very useful. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
I think Mark was disappointed there, seeing him scrubbing off a question.
Well, one off my bingo card. Natural capital value.
That's all right.
But before I come to Mark, Cahill.
Thanks, Chair. All the questions we'd scrub. Don't mind worrying about it now. But listen, thank you very much for your presentation, and just a couple of points. And hopefully I'm going to oversee the Armagh match in Clonus, but I welcome the work that's going on over there. I mean, it's a fantastic project, and I'll give a good boost, especially over on the Clonus side. So good luck with that. But I will start on that also. Can you give us a progress report on what has happened, and where do you see the roadmap ahead of it, please?
Yeah, so I have a reference earlier on, the North-South Ministerial Council extended Waterways Ireland remit to restore the Ulster Canal from Knockern to Clonus. That's a 13.5 kilometre stretch. Phase 1 we completed in 2019. That provided additional 2.5 kilometres of navigation from Upper Knockern to Castle Saunderson, adjacent to the International Scout Centre there in Cavan. That involved dredging of the Finn River, a new road bridge and Natal Arch at Derry Curb, and a new floating jetty at Castle Saunderson. So that's operational, 2019. Where we're focus at the moment is an additional 1 kilometre from Clonus back to the Fermanagh border at Clonfad. Works commenced on site in August 2022, and that project will be complete at the end of this month. So that'll be a further additional kilometre in the town of Clonus yourself, and if you're there this weekend you'll see it. In terms of phase 3, it's really connecting up phase 1 and phase 2. That's a further 10 kilometres. And we're currently actively involved in the pre-planning and the planning stages regarding the delivery of that project. We set up a project team specifically to look at that, because as John referenced earlier on, this is the potential investment for phase 3 in excess of €100 million. So it's a large transformative investment in our waterways.
And then going forward, and I'd like to be a wee bit ambitious about this, because I keep getting asked about ABC Council, which I'm on that area, and also Mid-Ulster, the likes of Portmore, up around like Watertown, the opportunities to connect. So I mean, I would like to think that in time working with councils going forward, because I mean that is it's the most beautiful stretch, but it's an absolute beautiful tourism product as well. And I think there's major opportunities going forward. So maybe that's in the conversations, and we'll keep that on the floor. The other one I want to talk about is the greenways, because I know that we try to encourage the Middletown Monaghan section of the greenways as cross-border, but my question in the context of cross-border cooperation and what visions. And I know you said the funding is slightly different for the greenways, but in your response to that, how are you connecting there, or the opportunities to connect with greenways north and south?
Well, obviously, I'll refer back to the Ulster Canal Greenway, where we're working in a very collaborative manner with Armagh, Brownbridge and Craigavon District Council in terms of that cross-border link from Monaghan to Middletown and beyond. So that's an ongoing engagement on a regular basis, using our expertise as the larger provider of greenways and blueways in the island of Ireland, how we can help to develop that project over time. So that's an ongoing engagement with Armagh, Brownbridge and Craigavon District Council.
You always have to keep it parochial, you know what I mean, just when you get an opportunity. But two other points then is, and as I see there, you mentioned KPIs and external benchmarking, and that's how it's measured. Could you expand a wee bit on that first, please? And my final point, obviously, then is the 3.2 million users of the waterways. How often are those figures measured, and how do they compare year in, year out?
Yeah, so maybe just to go back to the previous kind of question which came around this. So the measurement, measurement I think is from 2021ish.
Yeah.
And that was by way of quantitative research. Now, that's not necessarily something that we would want to do every year. It's expensive because you're reaching out to 1,300 people in terms of representative sample. We will do as I said. So we are working presently to put in place the research and the methodologies to measure, and we will measure a whole range of things, which will not just be about participation, but participation will be one of them. There will be research involved in that. So whether it's a full quant every year, or whether it's a full quantitative piece in year one, a smaller version in year two, a bigger one in year three, that's probably what it would look like in terms of measurement of the external piece. Internally, we have a whole series of KPIs that we measure in terms of our operational performance. And Linda, could maybe add something to that. They're managed on a monthly basis to a monthly management team, and they're obviously shared with our sponsor departments in terms of the quarterly monitoring piece. They're more internalised. The question I think you're asking may be more about the external piece and participants and users, and my answer to that is the former piece, which is around a mix of the quant and a mix of the methodologies that we put in place.
And are you using councils as part of that whole mix in terms of gathering information and research?
Not formally, I have to say. No, not formally.
There's an opportunity.
Yes, there may be.
Yeah.
We do work with. It's a good point. We do work with, for example, a number of our strategic partners. So we share research. We get research. We get resources from people like Tourism Ireland, Tourism Northern Ireland, Fáilte on the tourism side, ITech. We do work with them in terms of data sets. But your question is a fair question, and we'll take that away.
Yeah, and John, if I could just add that, in developing business cases, we would reach out to district councils for baseline information in terms of what they have in their area, and that would allow us to develop the business case looking forward, how we'd like to add value to that particular project. So we would do that on an ongoing basis.
I think they have a big role to play in going forward. Chair, I'll leave it at that. I've a couple more, but I'll let all the members.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Fáilte Rove. I had been going to ask now, you'd spoken of your assets, I suppose, like having a capital value of £1 billion, but then I've been going to ask around natural capital. Your assets are worth so much more than that £1 billion. That focused really on the rebuild costs, I think, of those capital assets. It's fantastic to hear the, I suppose, range and volume of work that you are doing. So it's a wee bit political now, but has there been a negative impact to the running of your organisation through the absence of a functioning NSMC for 5 out of the last 8 years?
It can impact us negatively insofar as it means that certain things have to be approved retrospectively. So I'll give you an example. The slide that has under corporate planning. So if you take the obvious things, a business plan, a corporate plan, annual accounts, for example, they can't get approved until there's a sectoral meeting and there's an NSMC to approve. We do all the work to prep and have it ready, as we are in that position now for a sectoral that we hope will happen in June. If we had a board, and there was a requirement for the appointment of a chair or board appointments, that would fall into the same category and could be trickier depending on the time involved. We don't happen to be in that position. Generally speaking, what we try and do is do what we can within our control. Generally speaking, that's what we do. That's the approach that we take. So where we can, and we get a lot of support from our sponsor departments, we manage our projects, we deliver our projects, and where there are tricky situations, we seek guidance from our sponsor departments, and on occasions we will have to get retrospective approval from a sectoral meeting.
Okay, look. And see, in terms of the funding model, the 85-15
Yes.
that has always been the way, the 85 always comes before the 15 because of the budgeting cycle.
In the way it works, yes.
And in the north. Are you therefore restricted, or what, in terms of your actual budget, what kind of communication is there between governments north and south through yourselves and around yourselves? If, like, we know things are going well in the south at the moment financially, it wasn't always the case.
Correct.
But if they were inclined to increase your budget by significantly, would there be a consultation with the DFI? Say, well, okay, we're putting in that's it, that's our 85%, and DFI, sorry, the cupboard's bare. Do you know we can't give you any more than we gave last year?
I'll speak generically if I can.
Okay.
Let's assume that one party was able to provide some more money and one party couldn't,
Yeah.
for example, match it. In that scenario, there would be a conversation with Waterways Ireland, and there would be conversations between the sponsor departments directly. And that's the reality of the world. So, and where possible, we try and collectively find a position that works for us.
So there's a flexibility maybe around the 85-15.
Well, everybody tries to be as flexible as they can be.
Is there more flexibility maybe?
Just more money.
But it doesn't matter, do you know if...
No, it's a fair question, and I'll try and answer it openly. I mean, the reality is nobody's ever going to come in and say, we don't want money.
Yeah.
You know, most agencies are looking for money. We tend not to ask for money. We tend to say, here's our plan, and we think there's a lot of goodness in it. Will you support us?
Therefore, it's important that I
And-
suppose your setup doesn't
Yes.
doesn't, I suppose, force you to refuse money.
Yeah, and in fairness to the people that we work with, they have been supportive of the plans that we've put on the table. There are prescriptions that are there 25 years. There are some very difficult prescriptions, not just around funding. So, for example, to go back to the organisation, there is a prescription around the maximum staff numbers. So we can't have more than a certain number of staff in place. And that prescription is, set out on a page with a kind of an organisation structure.
And does that staff split, I suppose, north and south? Is that prescribed
No,
as
no.
well?
The overall number is actually prescribed. And the organisation review that I referred to is the first opportunity for Waterways Ireland and its sponsor departments to try and look to work out what should the structure look like, what level of staffing should it require to deliver on its plans. So at least that's happening, and we're very happy that it's happening. And it will take a little bit of time and engagement with various people, but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But that goes back to a very old prescription.
And just one other thing, and it's on the current expenditure categories, and it was the difference, I suppose, between pension north and south, where you've 1% in the north and 9% in the south. Given the current staff split, I suppose, of 260 south, 90 north, so it's
say.
3 times as many in the south. Has that always been the way? And then how's the pension difference so wide?
Well,
Or are a lot of the employees in the north actually resident in the south?
No, it's not. It's not that. I mean, the proportionality in terms of numbers of people and pensioners who are pensioners now in Ireland.
Yes, that's those already.
That's where the bulk of the people are, rather than anything else. Yeah, rather than anything else.
No worries, no. Thank you.
Okay,
Now,
thank you.
Thank you. Just before I go back to Cathal, it's just a few more questions I wanted to ask. Obviously, we know about the sustainable funding model is strategic priority too. And just on the back of what Mark was saying there, what I suppose it states that yourselves lag significantly behind navigation
Yes.
authorities elsewhere in terms of total expenditure and employees. So what would you reckon would be appropriate levels of funding for yourselves?
That's a really difficult question to answer, Chair, and I'll try and explain why. I'll do the easy piece first. So if we look at staffing and rent benchmarking, we reckon that we have something like 0.32 staff member per kilometre of waterway. That's the 350 permanent staff. The average across a sample of navigation authorities internationally that we looked at was at least 0.5. Now, I want to be fair to everybody here. It's very hard to compare an apple with an apple. And I'll explain why. Scottish canals only have canals. And their ratio is well over
It's 1.2.
1.2. Other navigation authorities only have rivers. We actually have both. So we've over 400 kilometres of canals, and then the rest of the network, the 1,100, so 700 are rivers. So it's important to say apple with an apple, very difficult. But on the basis of just the numbers in annual accounts, that's what it looks like. We're at about 0.32. The average is 0.5. And then there are individual navigation authorities that are well above that. So at a very high level, looking at staffing, we're well below what the international comparator is. That's the first thing to say. In terms of actual funding, very difficult to work that one out. We could work out the staffing piece on the basis of what I've said, and that accounts for, as Linda showed earlier on, including pensions, about 2/3 probably of the funding that we would require.
Yeah.
Roughly. Then after that, you're into the big buckets. So a big bucket is maintenance. And, you know, no matter who you talk to in Waterways Ireland or any place else, they're all going to say, we need more money for maintenance. Like that's the thing. So maintenance is a big bucket. There is science around the maintenance because we have an asset management team in place. And that team is looking at conditionality of all our assets and pushing plans over many years into the capital programme and the maintenance programme. So there's a science there that's now beginning to help us. Where we don't have enough information to date is around the development opportunities. That's where we have a gap, and that's something that we're looking to fill over the next 18 months. We need to have development plans for every navigation that are then consolidated into one development plan. And on the back of that, we would have a much better sense of the ongoing current and capital funding that we need for that.
Thanks for that, because you also answered some other question in regards to that. But the other thing I wanted to check with you was you also talk about lagging behind in terms of generating income.
Yes.
To support the expenditure and profile needs. So how do other navigation authorities generate income, and can a similar measure be implemented by the likes of yourselves?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a very short answer, and Linda's going to give you a longer answer. The very short answer is that we don't generate enough revenue or income ourselves, all right, relative to the international navigation. So the same ones that I'm comparing staffing with, we've also looked at their ability to generate revenue or income. And I'll let Linda take that one.
So if you look for the closest models to us are Scottish Canals, so they probably have 70% funding actually from government, and the remainder is from commercial. Now they own a lot of land and they have a lot of development and so on. We don't own the same resources in the way that they do, and we haven't evolved should I say, in the same way that they do. So very, very different model to how we work. Canal and Rivers Trust, they have 23% government funding. They have massive boat licences and moorings, which is near 50 million. They also have utilities and water, again 40 million income. So they are a very, very different setup, and they're with their 3,200 kilometres, never mind all the other assets that they own. So they're a much bigger animal than we are. We are evolved much more localised into our local assets. So we are not funded in the same way. But what we are doing under that SP2, we're looking at a state management strategy, and we're looking at a revenue income strategy. So the revenue income strategy is just sort of near finalising as in the plan. So we're hoping to go through that, see where low-hanging fruit, as they call it, where that is, that we can actually escalate that and increase that, because currently our income is around $1 million that we generate ourselves. And then the other one is the estate management strategy, which is actually only about to be awarded. So that is another one that we're looking at to see how we can use our property, our land, our buildings in a different format going forward to generate some income.
Okay, thank you. Keith? Sorry.
Oh, no, you asked the question.
Yeah, okay. Keith?
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the information so far. My question follows on briefly from Mark's. So just for clarity, so whenever the Department of Housing and Local Government does the 85, Northern Ireland generally follows on the 15?
Yes.
Generally?
Yes.
And they've done that to date?
Yes, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this pie chart here, page 9 in your presentation. Staff cost 55%, administration 19%, maintenance 16%. Explain that, well, I have an understanding, but I want you to explain to me, what's administration? Is that for capital projects, or what's the difference between staff costs and administration costs?
Administration is your rents, your rates, the heat, the buildings, utilities, all that kind of thing. The maintenance is more what we actually spend in order to keep our assets in the current condition that they are.
Fair enough. And last question I have, Cal mentioned it briefly. My understanding in currently travel, I need to be careful I word this. I use the word boat, but maybe that's not the proper term. Is it for Waterways Ireland? Is a boat good enough?
Boat?
Yeah.
Oh, boat's fine.
You have enough for boat?
Absolutely, absolutely, Keith. Boat's okay, mate.
Boat's fine, yeah.
You can travel from the Atlantic, down through number 1 here, Lower Ban, to get into Lough Neagh.
Yes.
Okay. You're stuck in Lough Neagh because you technically can't get out of Lough Neagh even onto the edge of the Blackwater. You're probably aware of that issue.
Yeah.
So you've also talked about in your 10-year plan about accelerated growth.
Yes.
Do you see that linkage ever happening? So you get from the North Atlantic straight through?
I think visionary, that's something that people would want to see, including Waterways Ireland, but we have to be very realistic and put it in context. Yeah. So the Ulster Canal stretch that Garrett is describing, will complete in and around 28 or 29. And I've given you a sense of the funding need there, the expenditure, 125 million. So that is we'll add it all up, just to keep this simple, say 15 kilometres. The original Ulster Canal was of the order of 93 kilometres. So just think about the rest of it, and the time and the money.
But for a small amount of money, you could travel from Lough Neagh right to Blackwater Town. Yeah. For a very small amount of money.
I'm not disputing that. Yeah.
So why can that not be done?
It's not in our remit, first of all. That's the main reason. So this goes back to what Garrett said earlier on. Our remit was extended back in 2015, and when we talk about growth, we're also talking...
We're following that. Cal's aware of this one. ABC and that also council having this debate with DFI. The people on the ground can't get up and down that river, and the council blames DFI, and I'm not with Waterways Ireland, but it's just going around the circle, and we're not getting the issue, resolved. How would you resolve that issue?
We are looking to grow, and by looking to grow, we're looking to do things that we talked about earlier, but specifically on this. We would, over time, like to grow our navigation network. Mm-hmm. So we would like to extend where we can.
And who gives you the green light to do that?
The North-South Ministerial Council.
So can you ask to get that done? Can you ask to increase, to provide a waterway from the south of Lough Neagh, we'll call it, down to Blackwater? That's literally hundreds of thousands. It's not a lot of money.
We can have a conversation formally and informally with our sponsor departments to do that extension. We can. Yes. And
last point, if I may, who from DFI then manage so obviously they're giving you 15%.
Yes. DFI
for revenue, or we'll call it running costs, whatever. Who monitors that to see they're getting their 15% worth from you? And in what way do they do that?
The sponsor department
Yeah.
in DFI do it through the quarterly monitoring meetings and the monthly reports they receive directly from us.
Okay.
So we would send them reports on a monthly basis.
So they're marking to get the value of their 15%, we'll call it.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Okay, and very last point.
Finally.
No, the capital one, is that an 85-15? I see it's up and
No,
down a little bit,
no.
but is it, what way does that work? Is
No,
that
the
based on what 15%
No.
can spend, if you understand what I mean?
No, it doesn't. So just for clarity again, they're totally separate.
Yeah.
Which can be a good thing or a bad thing, and I won't go there, but they're totally separate. So the capital funding comes from each jurisdiction
Yeah.
based on projects in the jurisdiction.
Okay.
So if we go to a department and we say we've got a program that looks like the following, and we think we need to do 10 projects and they end up to 10 million, we present that.
Okay.
And if the funding is available,
Do you base that on the 15% you have to
No.
manage any money? You're maybe not that tight on that?
no.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. It would be really good if the follow-up conversations in terms of that
That connection
that connection. If you could follow up with us on that, because
We've taken a note.
yeah, that would be really, really good. I know for two people here in this, three maybe in this.
Well, Chair, to be fair, I mean, it takes partners.
Yes.
And the councils, the councils play a big part. I mean, obviously there's certain remits, but I'd certainly, like I said, contribution, that should be a conversation we should be having, because we're having it at the local level in terms of council. But thank you.
And by the way, if I could say, Chair, when the plan was published, it had reached around 3 million people, that particular launch. And on the back of that, we have received inquiries from
Very good.
various places around questions like the kind of question, member, that you're asking, just to make you aware of that. So it's not sitting in isolation.
No, thank you. Just lastly from myself, it's just in relation to the bylaws, and obviously updating them from 30 years ago, and obviously things have changed quite substantially in terms of how we use our waterways and the safety around waterways as well, which is vitally important. I know obviously as a local constituency MLA in Fermanagh and South Tyrone with the Loch Earn on my doorstep, I do get quite an awful lot of queries in relation to bylaws on the waterways. Can you just maybe point to what those bylaws, updating of those, what that actually will entail, on the, I was going to say on the ground, but on the waterways?
Okay, as I referenced earlier on, Chair, we're in the process of revising our Shannon Navigation or Canal bylaws. So they're over 30 years old. They're not fit for purpose. They don't give our inspector the tools to manage our waterways and our land-based assets. So in the last 30 years, we referenced the 600 kilometres of greenways. Our current bylaws are silent when it comes to managing our land-based assets, for the most part. So we want an up-to-date set of bylaws to allow us to manage our property for the benefit of the public in an appropriate manner going forward. With respect to the Earn bylaws, once we complete the Shannon and the Canal bylaws, look back, look at the lessons learned, how we approached it, how we delivered it, and then there would be an aspiration at some time in the future that we would revisit the Earn bylaws to update them as well.
And do you have any sort of time scale in relation to that?
Well, we hope to complete the Shannon Navigation and Canal bylaws this year, and then once that's done, take a bit of time, sit back, look at the lessons learned, and then with a view to some stage in the near future, we'd revisit the Earn bylaws.
I wouldn't want too much time though to sit back and look at them. But look, I think members, are you all content? Has anybody any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to the committee. We really appreciate your time today, and for giving us an overview of the work that goes on. We really appreciate it. So thank you for coming.
To Chair and members, there is an open invitation to come and visit us in Enniskillen. We would be delighted to bring you on a boat. which is
You
fine.
can bring your own oar with you, kiddo, you want, like, but
Delighted to bring you on a boat out and about and actually get on the waters and see what it is we're talking about. So that invitation is open.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
row your boat.
With a yacht, right? I think like it's been called a boat.
Yeah.
I talk about what it is. A vessel, that's probably a better word than a boat.
Okay, members, there's just, thank you. There's just an item I want to just follow up on, and that's we did have correspondence from Strabane Greenways just in relation to their specific requests in terms of West Tyrone and the lack of greenways. And we did raise some points there with Waterways Ireland. So just seeking agreement that we write to advise Strabane Greenways of the issues discussed with Waterways Ireland today and what was included in those discussions, and that will also be raising this during evidence from DFI and Active Travel, which is scheduled for the 12th of June. So are members content with that? Yeah. Okay. So if members are content, I'm going to move on just to item 8, which is SR 2024-000, the Period Products Department for Infrastructure, Specified Public Service Body Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. And you'll see at page 188 is a statutory rule. At page 197 is the Examiner of Statutory Rules 11th report of the session. I advise members that the regulations are made under section 2.1 of the Period Products Free Provision Act, Northern Ireland 2022. They specify the public service bodies within the functions of the Department for Infrastructure that are subject to the duty to ensure that period products are obtainable free of charge by persons on the premises who need to use them. They provide for the purposes of the Act descriptions of the premises to be treated as premises of a specified public service body and of persons to be treated as in those premises. The rule is subject to draft affirmative resolution. There have been no changes to the policy content since the SL1 was considered by the committee. So I inform members that the Examiner of Statutory Rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the statutory rule. So are members content with this rule?
Content.
Okay, so I'll read the motion that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered the draft SR 2024-0000, the Period Products Department for Infrastructure, Specified Public Service Bodies Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024, and recommends that it be affirmed by the Assembly. Okay, so item 9 is SR 2024-62, the Gilmore Street Ballymena Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2024. At page 206 you'll see the statutory rule, and at your table packs on page 2 you'll see the Examiner of Statutory Rules 12th report of the session 2023 to 2024. I advise members that the purpose of the rule is to abandon an area of 10 square metres of road which lies within a property of 8 to 10 Gilmore Street, Ballymena. The abandonment has been requested by the owner who wishes to sell the property but is unable to do so until an abandonment order rectifies an encroachment on the department's land which was overlooked at the planning stage. The rule is subject to negative resolution. There has been no change to the policy content of the SR since the SL1 was considered by the predecessor committee. So I inform members that the Examiner of Statutory Rules has raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the statutory rule. So are members content with this rule? So I'll just read the motion that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2024-62, the Gilmore Street Ballymena Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2024, and has no objection to the rule. At item 10, you'll see the SL1, the Planning Phase Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024. At page 214, you'll see the Clerk's memo, including the response from DFI on planning fee increases. At page 216, the proposal for the statutory rule. This statutory rule will bring forward an inflationary uplift of approximately 4% to planning fees based on the CPI figure for January 2024. This rule is subject to negative resolution. and I just want to remind members that the committee initially considered the proposal for the rule at its meeting on the 10th of April, and we agreed to ask the Department for details of the planning fee increases over the last 3 years and its assessment of how these are determined against the Consumer Price Index statistics published by the Office of National Statistics. The relevant extract from the Minister's response dated the 26th of April is provided at page 215 of the meeting pack. So are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content? Yeah. Okay, item 11 is the subordinate legislation SL1 not subject to assembly procedure. So advise members that there are 2 proposals for a statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings. The statutory rules begin at page 218 of members' packs. At page 219 is SL1, the road races, Drumhork. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Drumhork Hill Climb Order Northern Ireland 2024. At page 221 is SL1, the Waiting Restrictions Eglinton Order Northern Ireland 2024. The rules are not subject to any assembly procedure and are not required to be laid. So I ask members if they have any issues they wish to raise on the proposals. Are members content with the proposals for statutory rules? I'm sure some people will be in attendance.
I'll be driving. You'll be riding it.
Item 12 is the subordinate legislation SR is not subject to assembly procedure. I advise members that there is 1 statutory rule that is not subject to assembly procedure. At page 225 is the SR 2024-104, the road races Spa Mount Hill Climb Order, Northern Ireland. And I ask members to note the statutory rule. Content?
Yes.
Okay, so item 13 is our forward work programme, and you'll see that at page 231 is the draft forward work programme. And that will obviously be updated to reflect any decisions taken today. Is there anything you want to add in relation to it?
It's okay, just
yeah. Okay, so I'm just seeking agreement to proceed with the evidence sessions and strategic planning as set out in the draft forward work programme. All content? So item 14, any other business? So I want to ask any members if they've anything they want to raise. Any other items? No? All content? Okay, so the date, time and location of the next meeting will take place here at 10 a.m. on the 15th of May 2024 in room 29 Parliament Buildings. Thank you everybody, and I now adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29,